In a world so divided on issues that have a profound effect on humanity, how can we possibly help people to see that all human life is valuable?
And that all of these life issues are connected. It may feel overwhelming, but you are not alone.
Welcome to Consistent Life Network's Peace and Life Conversations podcast, where we will explore the journeys and thoughts of activists and everyday people of all generations who are working for the protection of all human life and promoting the consistent life ethic.
Hi, welcome to Peace and Life Conversations. We are talking to Rachel McNair today about some work she's been doing with Planned Parenthood. And I want to welcome Rachel. And Rachel, could you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into this?
Yeah, well, kind of funny to say I'm working with Planned Parenthood. I don't think they think that I'm working with them. I was taking a particular interest because they are, of course, the largest chain of abortion facilities in the country of the United States. They're also, of course, all over the world. But in the United States particularly, they have a set of centers, and they make a big point about how they do so much more than abortions. And in fact, they do. Like about 40% of what they do is sexually transmitted diseases testing and treatment. And only about a third is contraception. And according to their own, reporting of it. So, it's already terrible and astonishing that 1 out of 6 women who goes to Planned Parenthood gets an abortion, but that also means that 5 out of 6 are doing something else.
So I'm going to go back because that's a good point. The percent of abortions compared to how much money the abortions bring in. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. They say that only 3% of their services are abortions, but that's because a woman goes in for an abortion, she gets a pregnancy test, she gets an STD test while she's at it, she gets the sonogram, she gets this, that. I mean, she might get 10 services. The abortion is what she went in for, and that's 10% of the services she got on that visit. That's how they calculate that up. But abortion is a huge amount of their income. But see, this is, and of course, Pluralifers do a lot of work in terms of trying to get funding to stop it. Of course, that's a worthy goal from our point of view, but there's more to it than the funding. One is that if a woman goes somewhere else, they don't get the funding. The other is if the woman goes somewhere else, she doesn't get the pitch made that she ought to be getting an abortion. I mean, if we get her, say, to a community health center, like a couple of years before she's even pregnant, and so then she gets pregnant, she's at the community health, she's at Planned Parenthood, they say, oh, dear, we're so sorry. When do you wish to schedule your termination? Whereas if she's at the community health center, they're much more likely to say, you're pregnant. Well, we better get you into the prenatal clinic right away. There's one down the hall.
So the question goes back to, again, when Planned Parenthood is really pushing abortions, which you're making very clear. One is, are they doing it? Is a big percent of their funding coming from these abortions? Is it an ideological mindset, or is there something else or other things involved?
Oh, both. Both. I mean, when they're pushing a woman who's pregnant and maybe feeling ambivalent about it, or actually maybe pleased to be pregnant, they will still push that because that's where their ideology is and that's where their money is. Whereas a community health center, federally qualified community health center, and rural health clinics, by definition, do not do abortions. It's part of the definition. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have some staff members that like them, but in any event, we can be sure that they're not doing them. And so what I was thinking is, there are thousands and thousands of community health centers. There's like 570 some odd locations for Planned Parenthood, of which about 3/4 do abortion, and of course the remaining 1/4 are abortion pipelines. They'll sometimes they're in the rural areas, they'll send people to the city, or sometimes there'll be like 5 of them in a city and 4 of them don't do abortions but send everybody to the one that does. So the thing is, we even we're interested even in the ones that do referral only, because they're still abortion pushers, and because they're the very clinics that are most likely to become abortion clinics. They're already zoned for it. They don't have to worry about all that kind of thing. And because they're also the ones that are probably smaller and more likely to end up closing down if they lose a little business.
So let's go back a little bit, because we have the Planned Parenthood mostly in more urban type areas, and we have your rural areas. If we're sending people to Planned Parenthood, one of the things you're doing on your platform is you're trying to educate people about no matter where they live.
Now we have there are actually 2 project websites on Planned Parenthood, and they're entirely different audiences. One is called Grassroots Defunding, finding alternatives to Planned Parenthood. It is intended to build up nonviolent health care. And it's a website. The audience is pro-lifers. We've started the homework for them. They can go to their specific center. We have like each page is like a state, and then you go down, alphabetically by city, and you find your specific center, and it will tell you on the Grassroots site what the local community health centers are, and if there are none, we've looked for alternative clinics that still look like they would be good. We've done the web searches, we've started the homework, and you can click to the site, you can click and if anybody has any information about it, we put it on. It's a wonderful house for people to share information with each other, get the information, share what they know. The site is updated constantly. And
how do you get the traffic there? I mean, it's for pro-lifers, but how do you actually, what publicity do you actually push people there? Is there something that goes out that says pregnant, want an alternative?
No. This is the problem. This is for people who aren't pregnant yet. We want to get people to alternatives to Planned Parenthood who aren't even thinking about abortion because they aren't even pregnant. We want them going elsewhere for their pap smears. We want them going somewhere else certainly for their STD testing and training. They're doing a lot on urinary tract infections now even. We're saying, it's very common. Pro-lifers have good pregnancy help centers for women who are pregnant. And it's also good to send them to community health centers, and some of them wouldn't darken the door of a pregnancy health center. You can still send them to the community health center or other good alternative health centers. That'll be fine. Part of the point here is that we want to get women away from Planned Parenthood when they're doing what they want is entirely actual medical services. Not abortion. They're not even pregnant. They need STD testing and treatment. We want them to get it at the community health center and not at Planned Parenthood. Because one thing that happens is that it's non-cooperation. But another thing, as I said, is we want to get them out of Planned Parenthood's orbit. So this is, and as a peace movement, people who think like peace movement people think, we think of Gandhi and his constructive program. So that has 2 points to it. One is that you're not only showing what you're against, but what you're for. And the other is that you're building up the nonviolent institutions. So it's one thing to weaken the violent institutions, which of course we obviously want to do, but we also want to strengthen the nonviolent.
Right. And that's the big question is how. I know that you have an awesome, if you haven't visited it and you're listening to this, the website is awesome. It's really complete, tells you where to go. But the question still remains is your traffic, how do you get people there besides your people who visit our site? How do you advertise
Well,
to steer people?
the idea is, like I said, this site is for the pro-lifers. It's not meant for the general public. So the pro-lifers will know in their area what makes sense to do. Have a table at their college, leaflet concerts. There's all kinds of things they can do, and we also have a blog of people who have done some things that you can read up on. And like I said, this is also
Do you have resources up there for people? If you have a little page that says if you want to publicize our services and get this out
that's
there.
right. Well, we have an action page for if the community health center needs improvement, or if it's perfectly fine, or if there are none. So we have action suggestions on each of those.
So I'm trying to get at, and I know this is being repeated, but I guess I'm trying to get at. We want people to know about this. We want, as you said, before they're pregnant. We want people to know these are places they can go for their health care, and then when they're pregnant, this is where they're going to continue. So it's getting the word out. And also, there's people who are not hardcore pro-lifers, but they're not hardcore pro-choicers. Who, if they get pregnant, they're going to have the baby, unless they decide differently. So you want them going there. So I get
Right.
what can we do to help them know it's out there?
Right. And that'll vary location by location, but it helps a lot if you know the specific places. And if you know things like you're at Planned Parenthood, you can tell them that the STD test costs $10 less. Over at this location, you can catch the number 48 bus to get there, or it's a 3-block walk or whatever. I mean, that's why this is grassroots. The local people need to know. And
So you're trying to be the local people. We want you to get involved in letting people know that this is an alternative that you can go to.
well, and see, center by center, this is the specific location you can go to. This is not just a national thing. It's I mean, the local people are the ones that know, this CHC is in a terrible neighborhood. We'd rather get them over to that CHC instead. So we also have some information on how to research the local CHC. And then we have a lot of information just about the Planned Parenthood centers, like which ones are temporarily closed and which ones are only open once or twice a week. And I mean, all kinds of details like that.
When you're sending people to the bound of these other places, they do a whole lot of other things than Planned Parenthood does. They have tons of services. When you get them there, how okay, and some of them, how are these centers working to help people stay there or help people decide on alternatives to abortions? What methods do they use to help people make those decisions?
No, this is the thing. If you want to talk somebody out of an abortion and they're already pregnant, you send them to a pregnancy help center. The community health center is simply a place that doesn't do abortions and therefore doesn't push people into it. It may be that if a woman says, well, but I want an abortion, they'll say, oh, okay, fine, here's the Planned Parenthood over here. And we are not happy about that. But and it's one of the things you can research, because you can find out this CHC will do that and that other one over there won't. But you're still better off with the woman who has to assertively say that she wants that before she gets the referral, as opposed to being pushed into it when she never even brought it up herself.
Another question about those federally funded health clinics, and they do good work. They're mostly for people who are low income or
Right.
need sliding scale. So you're talking about some people who are pregnant who are not low income or sliding scale but are still on the fence, and they're going to go to their OBGYN who's going to say to them, you have the choice of termination. So that section of the population, how would you suggest using these forms?
The point is that Planned Parenthood itself is mainly for the low income people, in the same way that the community health centers are. I mean, people who aren't low income can certainly go to both, but as far as going to an OBGYN who refers to Planned Parenthood, here we get into the next one. The other project website I was talking about is called Problems at Planned Parenthood. And this is not for a pro life audience, it is for an audience of people who refer people to Planned Parenthood, or for journalists or legislators or anybody who wants to research Planned Parenthood. Because what we do on that website, which, I mean, it's a different website because it is not sponsored by a pro life group. It is sponsored by the Problems at Planned Parenthood Committee, and it doesn't give interpretations. It doesn't say, oh, look, isn't this terrible that they're doing this. It just says they're doing this, and it will include problems like health violation documents, the health inspections, malpractice suits, patient deaths, ambulance calls. We have quite a few of, well, it's audios actually, of 911 calls where they're calling to bring the ambulance to, and again, this is by center, and so you can look at a specific center. We have sexual abuse problems, employee rights problems, racism, financial ethics, privacy violations.
This subject, how are you? I mean, this sounds really serious. I mean, this is really serious stuff. How are you going? Are you going to the press with these
Yes.
problems? How are you making this public?
Well, we are certainly trying to get across to journalists, and of course, we're getting a whole lot of our information from journalists in addition to actual government documents. And we're doing things to try to get it to specifically the referrers. And one of the projects that we did, and Consistent Life Network interns helped work on this, is we sent a little report card. So it was like a half-page postcard that said, this is your Planned Parenthood center, this X center right here. It had, 3 ambulance calls and a malpractice suit. Here's, it's very specific to that center, and we sent it to the places that would refer to that center. Now, we've got also a full-fledged book made out of the website that we've sent to insurance companies, like the national ones, because they'll do it nationwide. So for things where it's a nationwide thing, we give them the whole book. The thing where it's a local center, the ones that are really substantial, we have sent those out. And so, and we're certainly looking for any good ideas that anybody would have on other ways to publicize the material, because we've got loads and loads of it. And one of the problems is that a lot of the publicizing work has had to wait because more problems came in.
So, are you sending anything out to the media? I mean, the regular media. I mean, I hate to call it mainstream. You might have,
Well, we're sending a copy of the book version to all of the journalists that we've covered in the book. That they have an article, and we say, see, you wrote this about Planned Parenthood, you're on page 32, and telling them that the website is constantly updated and would be a good resource for them. I think that's going to be more effective than just sending an email saying, hey, this is a resource that's available.
So besides a resource, I'm trying to get, if you found some, because you said some of the sites have a lot of serious violations. If you have found a few of them, it might be worth a press release to a local area saying you might be interested in this, is about your local Planned Parenthood. Because of the controversy over abortion, that might instigate some good journalism.
Well, in the same grassroots way that we were talking about for the community health centers, it's also true that a lot of the grassroots people are working with their local reporters directly. Now, press release, probably it would have to be for something that was recent. But for something that's, hey, this resource if ever you need to look things up, Be sure and get that across to your local reporters, because the
any other way that you're
one-to-one
doing
contact
to
is
try to
always
get,
going to be more
you know,
important than
because
anything
as
you
I
get in the
said,
mail.
this you talk about it, and it's very, very serious. Any other ways that you're trying to let the community know, even those who are pro-choice, this may not be a really good option for you, no matter what you're going for.
Right. Well, and that's how the website is designed, because the whole thing about, for instance, employee rights. Planned Parenthood has done union busting. And there have been some left-wing magazines that have been really, really upset about it. Well, that's not something that pro-lifers tend to focus on. But there are other people who would be really upset about it. And any reason is a good reason to say, let's go elsewhere. Some of the treatment of employees is really has been horrific, which, it has to be in order to get out to us, because the employees say, oh gosh, we don't want to say this, the anti-choice fanatics will make use of it. But they have open letters about the racism there, and a lot of the bad working conditions, overworked, underpaid, all that kind of thing. And one thing that, there are other sites that will have some information about Planned Parenthood if they're abortion clinics. We also cover Planned Parenthood, like I said, that whether they do abortions or not. But Google and Yelp have thousands of reviews where they talk about problems, and some of those are pretty horrific. And some of them will give us more information about ambulance calls that we don't have the dispatch for. And so we've got a lot more information there also, and your own center will have that.
Are you sending people to write reviews? Are you encouraging people to do that?
No. We're encouraging employees to send in reviews to places like Indeed, but the Google and Yelp, yeah, if you have a review that you can honestly say, go ahead, that's good. But there's already thousands and thousands of these reviews. And we have fewer than 300 of the employees, though. That's why I made that difference. So employees really do need to know, people who are thinking to go to work there really do need much more forewarning than is available in the reviews. But another thing that comes through in the reviews is that about a quarter of the places have a lot of phone problems. They don't answer their phone, or they give people the runaround. That can be really horrific if you've got a medical problem and you're trying to get through. And we first discovered this when we just had one of our interns was going to call and ask them where they referred for mammograms so that we could refer for mammograms. They mainly don't refer for mammograms. They talk about that, but they mainly don't do it. But that's when we discovered that about a quarter of them don't even answer the phone, or put you on hold for like 40 minutes kind of thing. So whenever one of the things that we've done on both of our websites is flagged all of the centers where there's phone problems, because that's one of the easiest things to document. If you've got a place that doesn't even answer the phone, you tell your OB/GYN, these folks don't even answer the phone. You don't have to explain to them about, life begins at conception and all this kind of stuff. They're not going to send anybody to a place that doesn't answer the phone.
So, and there's two more main questions,
Mhm.
if you could briefly answer them. One, just to review, if people are looking for an alternative, not just because they're pregnant, but for pro-life health care, they can come to the site and they can find, especially if they're low income, some places that will do alternative health care for them.
Well, no, if you want pro-life health care, you go to a pregnancy health center that offers it. What you get at the community health center is good health care that by definition cannot include abortion. Okay, so we have to be careful about that, because any given community health center could be run by a director that used to run a Planned Parenthood. And so they'll have if ever we know about that, we put a little marker on saying that there's a problem there.
So, yeah, wrap up how people can get to the site, and then also
Yes.
your continued work. So how can people contribute to your work?
Okay. The alternative site is both of them. These are constantly updated websites. I mean, literally at least once a week, these are updated. And so anybody who has any information, if you look at the site and say, my goodness, she doesn't have the Jones malpractice suit on this site, well, send me the Jones malpractice suit then.
At a time, so we have 1 or 2 minutes to say anything else about all this great work you're doing.
Well, of course, I'm doing work on all kinds of different projects. This is specifically Planned Parenthood because we, as peace movement pro-lifers, we think in terms of how do you encourage non-cooperation? How do you build up the nonviolent? How do you make the violent wither? And so we actually have lots of practice in that, and so that's why we think that way. To get even just their ordinary care, they aren't even pregnant yet. I mean, that's the easiest time to get them is when they're not even pregnant yet. It's a lot harder when they are pregnant. If you get them away from Planned Parenthood's orbit earlier, then that works. And then the other is educating about the problems Planned Parenthood has. And again, that's a peace psychology thing, because the reason they have so many problems is that these are traumatized people because they're involved in mass killing. And people who are involved in mass killing, even if they don't define themselves that way, are going to be traumatized. That means they're going to be emotionally numb, and that's where, or have outbursts of rage. And that's where, a lot of the rudeness and the sloppiness and all these kinds of things, that's where that comes from.
And that is going to be the topic of another show, because I know you wrote a whole book about that, and the whole book could be a topic of another show. So I thank Rachel for doing this, and we'll be talking to Rachel again very soon. Thanks, Rachel.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining the Consistent Life Network's Peace and Life Conversations podcast. All links and organizations mentioned in our episodes are linked in the description box. For more information, visit us at consistentlifenetwork.org. We'll see you next time.